Damn home.
So he's not going to meet with the cops.
Happy Monday, everybody.
Hi, happy Monday.
Hey.
Yo.
Okay.
Oh,
Final
geez.
question.
Why
If-
is that auto playing?
Is my heater making too much noise?
I don't hear it. Bryce says, hold on, though.
Say something, Andrew?
Oh, what's that?
Can you just say something?
Yeah, I just turned it off, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, then there we go. Hi, everybody. We'll do weird things here in just a few minutes if you're tuning in. There'll be no cord killers this week. We'll be back next week.
Killed it.
We killed it.
Killed it.
Though, I don't know if you guys saw today, Netflix announced it.
Oh, yeah.
Jessica Jones and Punisher got the axe.
Yeah, the writing.
Shocking.
Writing was on the wall there. I think it's that's a wrap for that era of Marvel programming. Had its hits, had its misses, and we shuffle on.
We talked a bit about this on Cord Killers. The new Hulu series, The Offenders. Kevin Smith writing, Dave Willis from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Intentional dig or artistically appropriate mirror image?
What?
Oh, do you know about this?
No.
Hulu's doing 4 Marvel originals. One
I
about
believe they're all animated.
one about MODOK. One about and MODOK is basically he's trying to run. Imagine the Mighty Monarch. Basically, he's trying to run a criminal enterprise and dealing with the minutia.
Sure.
And so that's Kevin Smith and also Dave Willis of Aqua Teen Hunger Force fame, Howard the Duck, and 2 more. But there's going to be a crossover event of all of them called, or I guess it's all called The Offenders, which would seem to be a little wink and a nod to the Defenders.
Well, I think the Defenders was always, I think, a gag from before about the Defenders, and that I don't think Marvel's going to be ripping their own source material.
I do think that it is. I mean, in terms of the landscape of Marvel television, it will certainly kind of play off that in that Deadpool kind of way. I wouldn't be shocked if there was a little meta kind of humor to it. But yeah, look, I mean, Marvel's gonna. I think the new Marvel way is where, however, we can spread and bolster this IP while no longer signing contracts that are in perpetuity, because now we are in the pole position and we don't have to do that. I did go into a deep dive over the weekend about how long the legal battle between Disney and Universal over Marvel Island.
Oh man, I was just there thinking about that.
Apparently, the thing that I found was that the rumor is that one of the only actual granular things that Disney could leverage to get out of that deal is maintenance. That if they can reasonably prove, and Universal cannot cure within a certain amount of time, that they are doing their due diligence to maintain it as a first-class theme park, then they could have a reasonable chance to contest the thing, and that's why they wound up redoing the Hulk coaster, and apparently they're going to be doing a big new fresh coat of paint on all the heroes' costumes so they appear more in line with the current books.
It's funny because I remember I don't think I'm talking out of school, but back when I was at Halloween Horror Nights, I remember them being very pleased. This is before the MCU, but after the first couple of Spider-Man movies, they were very pleased that their Spider-Man costume looked enough like is it Sony property or Fox?
Yeah.
Looked enough like the Sony one, but was within the legal bounds of being classic Spider-Man. So it's like weirdly, they were discouraged from being movie appropriate, and instead they had to stay comic book appropriate.
Yeah.
And then now to hear that that's flipped, it is like, nope, we need you to movie more.
No. They would still have to be comic book appropriate.
Okay.
But this is Disney's like, well, all these things look very old, and they are giving the impression that Marvel comics are very old or that we are not making new comics. So you need to make these characters look like the way that they look in the books that you would buy
Today.
now.
Got it.
Many of which are now patterned on the fact that the movie costumes are really popular.
Right.
Alrighty, you guys going to do the show?
Yes, indeed.
Alright, then take it away, Andrew, in 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to the Weird Things podcast. I'm Andrew Main, joined by Brian Brushwood,
Aloha.
Bryce Castillo,
Hello.
Justin Robert Young.
Hey!
Gentlemen, I'm going to jump right into a story here. It's kind of interesting. Maybe you missed it. Although Star Wars has laid the foundation for almost every modern war movie, the classic series didn't inspire a significant number of fans to become pilots. That changed with the release of the 2015 film Rogue One, a Star Wars story. According to EW, the film inspired about half of all drone pilots to report it to a school in Arizona for a one-year program conducted by the Air Force Flight Center in Palmdale, California, to teach them how to fly military drones. Tufts University, an independent mission school outside of Boston that doesn't accept most state-funded financial aid, filled the pilot program, which saw 177 students participate. One of those students was a 10-year-old Brendan Redford, a semi-professional Dota player whose mom admits she watched the film that day in order to relate to her son's obsession with the sport. The film showed me how anyone can become a hero, she told Jessica Smolin, a Mashable reporter at his house over the weekend. It's just not your father or your father's brother all the time. Everyone should enjoy playing a video game. Then it's like your constant fight with your siblings about who gets to play in the next installment of the Halo video games. She added, now for the first time I think about when I see a drone flying around as whether my second child is someday going to have the same hobby. Why do we encourage kids to play video games that they don't really understand? Their buddies are more experienced, so what's the big deal? And it goes on. Although the Star Wars did help with officers whet their appetite for the kind of drone experience they'd have since nap time, I suppose Rogue One is as being a little unfair to the original story. If you're not watching, it includes the wonderful trench run, blah, blah, blah. Any thoughts?
I mean, there's a lot of different angles that we want to take it through. On the one side, piece of art inspires people to strive to achieve interesting thing and get good job. That's great. Mm-hmm. Darker interpretation would be piece of art gets people to sit in a warehouse and press buttons that kills people on the other side of the world. Mm-hmm. I don't know which of these branching conversations you're most interested in.
You know, the one I'm actually most interested in is that story is a complete fabrication. It was generated by OpenAI's new text generation software.
Doggone it. I was sitting here thinking, like, I'm so surprised this is what he's going for. I thought for sure we would be talking about the OpenAI story. Oh, well played, sir. Well played.
So, clear, that was a fake story. Totally fake. The first few sentences were a prompt given to OpenAI's GP2 software, and it generated everything else. It just does sort of like it tries to predict what it would think would be the next sentence based upon millions of entries from reading the web.
Oh, my God.
That's insane. So Andrew sent me a few of these over the weekend that were startling. Like, just insane. Like, if you were to flow this into any website, I think it would be hard to say that this was anything other than legitimate.
And you know what's funny is I only read like one or two of those bot generated stories, and because this subject was a different one, that you just demonstrated the fact that I heard some words from a trusted source And because I had no reason to suspect that this was not a real article, I just grabbed everything, and you ended up, I don't mean this in the negative way that it sounds, you ended up burning 2 minutes of the podcast, and that's the real thing that scares me about this, is whether or not all of them are eventually found out to be computer generated or whatever is not the real military value of this article generation. It's the 2 minutes that was wasted before we found out that it was. It's like a denial of service of my attention attack. And if somebody weaponized this, they really could take somebody who, let's say somebody has the secret to nuclear fusion or whatever, but he lives in a country that you don't like. You find out that he's into Pokemon. You keep hitting him with counterintuitive Pokemon stories that need to be deconstructed, and you divert his attention away from fusion and into Pokemon arguments.
The mind just sort of keeps going with all the sort of implications. So they published 500 of the sample texts that this machine generated on GitHub, and I've read through about 300 of them. And a lot of them are just gibberish. They start going off in random points, but a lot of them you start to read, and I'm like, you get political stuff in there, and I'm reading like, this makes as much sense to me as half my RSS feeds that I've read. And you start reading, let me see if I can find one of my favorite ones, which was, let me do a search for this. I'm going to do you start to read, it becomes kind of like let me read this one too. Atlanta, Georgia. A Georgia Department of Transportation study has revealed that gray whales are a danger to coastal vessels, more so than sharks and close to 2 times more dangerous than killer whales. Arctic blue whales, on whose migration routes these coastal shippings pass, were a lesser risk to boats. Quote, the biggest piece of information we have coming out of our study is that there are a lot of people who think marine animals aren't a problem, argues Georgia coastal marine scientist Barry Albright. According to a new study, annual closures of hazardous marine animals along coastal shipping lanes, bloodhound racing systems, and Fifth Third Bank, a regional bank with regulatory oversight of commercial fishing stocks, propose to close an annual 55-knot stretch of coastal lake-like box seals in the Caribbean. This gets a little off the rails here. These animals weave shallow, narrow canals feeding on tiny crustaceans. Box seals with testes to minimize the wetter weather or food conditions they experience during their first-year migrations are considered especially vulnerable to freezing temperatures. But then my favorite part of this is, so we're in an alternate world where seals are attacking shipping routes. And then they get to plans by Florida Seaquarium to injure captive sperm whales in an effort to deter pens from chasing, some pods or something. It's like, so now we're at a place where Seaquarium is planning to, torture these whales.
Yeah. That is insane. And where my mind immediately went upon reading this story and reading the stuff that Andrew sent me is I started to think about people like stories like Jason Blair from the New York Times, who was busted for writing a bunch of fake stories, and by accounts both public and people that I know that worked at the New York Times when he was there, he suffered from tremendous anxiety and was an alcoholic. And when he would get tasked on going somewhere to do something, he would let those demons get the best of him. He would sit in his apartment and he would write these stories. This is at a point now where, with that technology, that is easier than ever. You could just hit a button, and then if you want to line edit that, it's making up sources, it's making up everything that you need to do, that you would need to do what Jason Blair did, which, I think lasted 3 years. He was writing fake stuff. Like, that's crazy.
Well, and I don't think it's a stretch in terms of computing power to not only write the article, but to also make sure that that all of the appropriate citations are backdated and placed on Wikipedia. Like, you could write the article today and go ahead and precede facts 6 months ahead of publication, so that when the article comes out, you're able to link to all the appropriate Wikipedia things.
And let's step beyond just the idea of like we're already using computers to generate, let's say, like articles on sports and stuff. They take scores and do some reporting on that, and you could do a much better version of that with this because you could have, an article it could give the sports scores and who played, and then it could say, and meanwhile Steph Curry, had an injury or something. It could go on about that. It could do stuff like that. But think beyond this. Part of the implication here is they use the sort of the article generation as an example. By the way, they have it like do high school level book reports, like explain the Civil War, or they said they were disturbed because we said, hey, explain why recycling is bad, and it wrote a very persuasive essay, and it says, well, it's the danger of rhetoric. It's the danger of rhetoric is that if you're persuaded by rhetoric or polemics, which most people are, and I think we are too, but try to be aware of it. You're going to be vulnerable to this. But beyond that, the conversational abilities that this is going towards is that you could tell something like, hey, let's talk about Star Wars, and it could pull up some random thing about Star Wars. You could have a conversation, or you have the ability, imagine to have a computer that tells you, Brian, a story that knows things you like, and then you put on your Audible headphones, and maybe it gauges a little bit to see your reaction to what you're interested in, and it just designs the story as it goes.
Yeah, like real-time biometric feedback where it's like, okay, this is what we expect. He's sort of drifting, but that's good because we're at the end of the first act. That means he's understood the setup and all that stuff. Now we got to hit him with a surprise to get him back in. And okay, now he's not feeling enough pain. Let's really torture this main character and make sure of all the. It seems like over the first 2/3 of the book, he has more concern for this little girl than for the love interest. So we still have time. Let's make it more about him saving the little girl. That's remarkable. That's remarkable.
You could do an incredible choose your own adventure.
And I'd hate to say it, but that's what I like. I don't like. We've talked about Black Mirror. What was it, Bandersnatch or whatever? I don't like being handed a job. I feel like that's the author's job is to figure out for me the way this story should go. And in this case,
lazy.
In this case, they're just watching very attentively as I listen and making sure that they win that audience over, which is not a new phenomenon. That's what stand-up comics have done. That's what entertainers of all varieties. You could tell when you're losing the audience, and you make adjustments on the fly to get them back. Now AIs are going to be able to do that.
So there's a lot of implications to this because it's, if you read through the samples, a lot of them are kind of like just mungled garbage, but it is amazing when you read through something and you see it because it's read the internet. It'll put like, oh, photo of blank here, it'll put insert copyrights at the end of it. It does all these little things that you're used to this, like little ads that pop up because it's like it's been taught a language. It doesn't quite understand, but it knows when I'm doing a news article, I need to do this. And so what they did is they took something like 6 million entries, top-rated comments, news articles, etc., and they built a system. And this is a common thing you do in machine learning is where you try to figure out predict the next thing in a sequence. When you do your Gmail app and you type in a thing and it suggests words to use, that's kind of like it's called long stem, or it's a way of going, we think the next word's going to be this. And this is a much more sophisticated version of that where you give it a paragraph and it says what sentence comes next. And it has something like, 40 gigabytes of data. There's the size of the model, which is pretty, not too big, but still a big sized model. Uses that to predict the next thing, predict the next sentence. And you can say, okay, well, now that you wrote that sentence, what's the next sentence after that? And what's the next sentence after that?
So here's the part that scares me is up until 20 years ago, or even maybe up until today, I would have regarded in general the ability to be convinced by a superior argument and to change my mind as something universally positive, in that it encourages more discourse and evolution of thought to perceived higher modes of decision. Now that we know or are seeing a proof of concept that a robot can essentially cast a spell to cause you to believe something, and that somebody else, whether they believe it or not, can say, robot, cast a spell, a verbal spell that will cause Justin Robert Young to see the wisdom of quitting Night Attack. Then theoretically, they're just going to get better and better and better. And we are is this the beginning of the phase of humanity where we're kept animals, where we're the dogs?
So, two things. One thing this came out. Some other AI researchers are like, it's more PR. We've been doing this sort of thing for a while. And yes, there's been text generation systems and AI and stuff, and there's a couple other models have been done. To my knowledge, this is the best. This is the best. And people are like, yeah, well, they just use a larger data set. Well, it's like these it's only this sort of things. They start to add up after a while. And then, we're holding iPhones in our pocket. Our cars are driving themselves. So it's kind of like you can kind of go, if you've been following along, you can go like, well, yeah, this was a next step. But it's the art is there is very, 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 is a very big deal.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And to the point of what's next? OpenAI was started with the premise that, hey, we want to do open research, that we want to make the stuff available for other people to analyze because we'd rather do research in the open for people to follow. And they had a little caveat, like, unless situations warrant it, we want to make all this available. They have not made the GP2 model available. And they said, we're worried because the potential for this for being used for malicious actors, we want to study that and figure that out first because it could be used for spam generation, for all sorts of stuff. I think, looking through what I've done with this model and talking to some, looking at some of the forum threads on it, whatnot, and one of our friends of the show is involved with OpenAI. I think you could probably use this at this point right now, and I could take a lot of your Twitter comments, Brian, and I could probably make a pretty good Brian Twitter bot.
Yeah, just put lots of exclamation points and say, boss. I think you're halfway there.
Well, but in all seriousness, though, that like the ability now, to do that, I mean, I think we're kind of there. And I think that it could write probably some short forms of like, very formulaic fiction, like romance and stuff, like novellas and stuff. Mm-hmm. And as far as it, you couple this ability. Yeah, I think we're going to start seeing as a tool for persuasion. Like there are political essays in here. They're like, what if JFK came back and gave a speech? And you read that, and you read this like, I don't think it makes any less sense than any politician on the scene today's speech. It is going to be at first. It'll one of the dangers of AI people worry about isn't so much the big robot takes over, is that certain people have these tools and other people don't.
Yeah, I wonder. So we had talked about kind of a similar idea when it came to facial recognition technology, and we talked about like nowadays, a computer can instantly know who everybody is walking past a camera, and I'm still waiting on this, but now it seems more inevitable than ever. What I'm really curious about is when computers start going back through photographs from history and say, oh, Hillary Clinton was in the crowd at this one speech at that one time, and using after the fact evidence to construct a full timeline for people. Likewise, I wonder how many people are currently writing under a pseudonym that will be outed when it's like, yeah, dude, this writing style is 98. Nice try, Richard Bachman. You're clearly Stephen King. And I wonder how many of them like aren't public stories yet that will be found out by style analyses. Yeah,
they've done that sometimes when they have a suspicion of some writers, like was it Joel Klein or one of the writers, Stephen Levy, I think, or some prominent Newsweek writers was writing under a pseudonym, and they were able to figure out it was him by using that. But yeah, once you can
was that Primary Colors?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, because it was published synonymously, but about the Clinton presidency. Only they didn't call it the Clinton presidency.
Yeah, about that campaign.
Yeah, I think that certainly gets the analysis thing. But imagine the GPT-3 that gets even more sophisticated and it knows narratives, and I think that's a goal I think they're working towards, is going to be trying to be able to do really compelling narratives, like stories. Like there's actually, we'll read it if you want, there's some Lord of the Rings fan fiction they included on the display page, but you couple that with the ability, now we've seen other software that you could say, show Fred and Wilma sitting at a table, or show this, or deep fakes where it just has stick figures do it, then it uses deep fake technology to put faces and people on it. Yeah. Nothing will be real anymore. And also, it's like you read this in this alt reality and you start looking around you going, I'm more convinced we're in a simulation now.
Well, look, the remarkable thing here is it shows you how formulaic news writing in general can be. And part of that is by design, and part of it is in our modern world, we have a lot of content. and people rushed to put it out. And, even some of the norms that kind of came along with baseline news writing is kind of been relaxed as we find new ways that people connect via the written word. What's amazing here is like, how close are we to this being, beyond its tools as fake news? How close are we for it basically just generating real news real time?
Yeah, I think we're going to see this, or Google's tool, or Microsoft is going to sell a tool to newsrooms for news agencies to say, hey, here's how to take a press release and turn it into an original article, how to take, sports scores and do a more sophisticated article, how to...
Because you already pointed out that a lot of what the stuff is being used now for is what is referred to in the industry as gamers, which are basically just the article version of a box score. And you can understand if you would really just need a quote or, and even those you don't really need. You can just say, okay, well, State beat Tech. This number, this person had this amount of yards, and that was that. What I think you're right, Andrew. If you can basically just say, like, hey, we're going to here's a bot that turns press releases into a blog post. That kind of feels like half the content on IO9. Like immediately you have taken away anybody's job who it is to just reword a press release and then put maybe another Google's worth of context into it. Like there's no reason why that can't be done with AI.
You're going to get to, it's like, let's say that the White House has an announcement and you take the transcript of the announcement, you put it in there, and then the article can go in there and can make references to it and cite other comments or other stuff in there. On one hand, you'd be like, great, this will be objective journalism. Well, as we've seen, our ability even to, mark what's legitimate or not legitimate news sources is not that good. But
yeah, I think there is an idea that algorithms are, pure on some levels because they are not the complicated human, but that is ultimately kind of, I think the lie is put to that the more you understand that an algorithm is programmed to do a thing. So if the programming has a bias to it, in fact, an old, longtime listener to Night Attack, who's now a programmer for IBM, Oho, had somebody made some point about how algorithms were like pure, and she's like, no, they're not. Look, I'm going to write a facial recognition algorithm, and I'm going to train it to only find a-holes, and I'm going to train that an a-hole looks like your face. And so now I'm going to run all these photos. Oh, look, there's one a-hole in this photo. That's because I'm biased against you, and I have made this to demonstrate that.
Yeah, and I think we're a little more suspicious now of algorithms and that too. But I can't even imagine how we're going to see this stuff. I mean, I can imagine how we could, but how it's really going to get played out, no clue, because it's just so, mind-boggling.
Do you think that this should be released to the public, or do you agree with OpenAI's decision to hold it back, or even to announce that they were holding it back?
I agree with the idea of let's take a look at this. The problem they're in is people like, then why did you bother announcing it? And their comment is like, we want to show people, our goal is to tell people kind of like what's going on, and we want to have a conversation about this because, for one small group to decide, yeah, no, we think this should be out there or not. And I think that part of it is let people know this is a thing before you're being a victim of the thing, potentially, theoretically, in your inbox. They have a tool, Google Colab tool, which allows, some researchers to go in there and to experiment with it and play around with it. And I think that's what you want to do now is get a larger group of trusted people and let them experiment with it and see. And meanwhile, just, the example I've made is we've had prominent politicians fall for phishing scams. We've compromised government databases. Some of the worst security breaches have happened because smart people who I think are genuinely smart people, have fallen for phishing scams. And when you have the ability to say, oh, how do I make a really compelling, email or something from what looks like the trusted source to get somebody to fish people, whatever. There's so many examples of that, and I mean, of how that could be, misused. So I think, yes, right now, examine it, look at it, and then eventually, I mean, somebody's going to release something like this. There's going to be like, the deep fake or some data set's going to come out there like this.
I would love, in my mind now, I'm like, man, I would love to just have like a rumor bot. Like literally just maybe you have an email that people can send, and and we're not going to screen them, right? Like I'm literally just going to have a bot with your one rumor. Pick an industry, right? Your rumor about an industry, and then we're going to take that one sentence and it will generate a rumor, and we're just going to put it out there. And it's just going to be wild, and sometimes they'll be right, but other than that, you'll just understand this is a bot generating articles based on wild speculation.
I mean, the problem, I'm thinking like, for the health of humanity in general, the problem is like we have weird flaws, like what's the one that Daniel Kahneman talked about? It's not pegging or anchoring, where even if you know that this is a nonsense number that has nothing to do with the question you're about to be asked. They would ask people, they would spin a mystery wheel, and it would come up with a number between 1 and 100, and then they'd say, okay, that's what that mystery wheel said. It said 97. New question, how many countries do you think in Africa belong to the United Nations? And just seeing that number beforehand caused people to statistically either estimate higher or lower. And it's like, on the one hand, I'm all in on the fun and games of a crazy rumor engine, but and I would wish that, knowing that it's coming from a rumor engine that is algorithmically generated, essentially a nonsense machine, I would like to believe that that would cause us to not go through with it. But it's like, no, but instead I could just totally see it's like, no, man, no, I guess, look, stop clock has to be right twice a day. Maybe he is a pedophile. I'm just saying, I'm just asking questions here. He looks like a pedophile to me.
Is that something that we need to work on culturally then? Like, should we be seeding more chaos and noise? Or let me reframe it. Are we headed to a land of unlimited chaos and noise no matter what?
Yes.
And anything that we can do to prepare ourselves for the future wherein we can believe nothing is better.
Right. So I think that it is a biological problem that we have. Just like if somebody doesn't produce enough insulin, we should have the ability to inject insulin. Just like if your eyes are shaped the wrong way, you have glasses. I think we desperately need AI lenses that let us know the probability of what we're seeing being garbage and algorithmically generated and done at the behest of bad actors.
I think of and thinking about a recent event with a lot of things that some that were blowing up, misrepresentation, some things that may be hoaxes, whatever, is the idea if we all need this sort of inbox, and this inbox, things go into the inbox, and we can say, hey, I can talk about the thing in the inbox, but I haven't pulled this into the likely to be true box, the much bigger box. And I saw this thing, I heard this thing online. It's in the inbox and it's in the maybe box. We can talk about the maybe box, but let's not make the maybe box the positive box just because it hits our emotional things. And I think a bit about I don't talk about politics and a lot of stuff, recurrent events on Twitter, because one thing is I know that anytime some big thing happens, 72 hours later, the narrative changes.
In general, hot in the moment takes on Twitter don't age well. So Let's all endeavor to have as few hot in the moment takes as we can.
Yeah, because I don't want to have to be 48 hours later secretly delete a tweet or be like, I just it made sense. It's like, no, we don't know. We're hearing it third. News report comes out, they're hearing it third hand. Then just eventually we find out maybe what's going on. So I think the idea of, hey, everybody, let's have the maybe box. I heard this thing. Maybe it's true. And you can talk about it like, hey, do you see this thing on the news? Yeah, it's interesting. Let's see if you find out more. Not, oh my God, I can't believe he said this, or she did this. It's like, well, maybe they did, but we're so vulnerable now.
And in a way, a lot of the stuff that this would exploit, that an AI program like this would exploit, are things that we've kind of seen now already in terms of our fractured media culture that we already see the most damaging elements of taking a block of something real and then only focusing on one part of it, or sharpening the implications on the other end of it and then presenting that as the news story. Like this is what we would worry the most about with an AI thing that would lead people down a certain primrose path by way at scale, as the OpenAI organization puts it.
Let me read you a couple paragraphs from something here, and then we'll talk about another kind of scary thing. Okay. Libyan security forces, this is probably the prompt paragraph. Libyan security forces for the first time late on Wednesday killed the leader of Al-Qaeda's branch in Libya, Abu Yabul al-Libi, and captured several of his followers in southern city of Sirte. Al-Libi, who is said to be the most senior Al-Qaeda figure in Libya, was captured on Tuesday following what Libyan security officials said was a raid supported by airstrikes by the United States. His expulsion from the International Terrorist Organization was realized in a dramatic break with the group's tradition of followers blindfolded and taken to executing Interior Ministry Toxicology International, sources told the New York Times. So anyhow, we go on here what looks like, a little critical thinker might go through and say, like, there's some problems here, but mostly, hey, it's, about, involving Al-Qaeda, involving Libya, involving these sorts of things, okay? And it looks sort of like, I think it would probably pass most people's test as far as a real article. One of the things that Facebook has been dealing with pushback in other countries has been that in other places they've had people murdered because rumors spread through Facebook, and not to single out Facebook, just through social messaging mediums, all of a sudden, people gathered outside of a police station in Mexico and set two guys on fire they thought were like child molesters in their village, and they were just two dudes looking for work. And you get this sort of how fast this fake news spreads through areas. And, as a weaponized tool, potential here, but really overseas and other places, kind of really scary.
Was there, and hopefully I'm not committing the exact crime that we're talking about, I could have sworn that I saw a headline indicating that there appeared to be, as part of the Russian troll farm, one of their projects was to fund the debate about vaccines with the intention of there being a rise of measles outbreaks in the United States. That certainly makes sense, but then again, that's the problem with fake news, is that it always makes sense.
Yeah,
That's why you believe it.
Like the MO of not only the Russian troll farms, but also this is something that has kind of gone throughout Europe in terms of the, effectively, look, America's a rich country. And whether or not we are rich on the level of influence that a state actor like Russia wants to affect, or we are just rich in that our bank accounts are larger, and therefore Macedonian teens want to get you onto crazy, shifty websites so you'll accidentally click on ads and they can make X amount of money from it. They want to find the controversial thing that will get you engaged. I think that is how they wound up getting into politics on the level that they got into politics, because people were very, very interested in it. And if you look at stuff that gets talked about on Facebook a lot, like people got opinions about vaccines. And I think it's, something that I think anybody who attempts to have a rational debate about stuff like this, you can explain to them the benefits of it, but it doesn't stop the fact that there is a section of online discourse for which is very distrustful. And I do believe that those flames are being fanned by those who would like to monetize your discourse, your arguments.
I sent both of you a sample of Lord of the Ring fan fiction. This was one of the examples that they put in their paper.
This is all secretly stuff Andrew's written, but he's embarrassed about it, so he's claiming it was OpenAI.
We weren't going to say anything. So the first sentence was the prompt. They wrote one sentence, and then the system wrote everything else.
So Legolas and Gimli advanced on the orcs, raising their weapons with a harrowing war cry.
The orcs' response was a deafening onslaught of claws, and claws. Even Elrond was forced to retreat. "You're in good hands, dwarf," said Gimli, who had been among the first to charge at the orcs. It only took 2 words before their opponents were reduced to a blood-soaked quagmire, and the dwarf took his first kill of the night.
The battle lasted for hours until 2 of the largest orcs attempted to overwhelm Aragorn. When they finally stopped, they lay defeated and lifeless for miles and miles. "I take nothing," said Aragorn, "but I give my word at my peril and mine that I will never forget this day of horror. None of us will forget, ever!"
"I'll never forget," cried Gimli, who had been on the thick of the battle but hadn't taken part of it. One of the wounded orcs he had carried off, he was only one of the survivors who remained uninjured. "We'll keep the memory of that day of evil and the war of it alive for as long as we live, my friends."
"Then we'll keep it alive as long as we live," added Legolas, "and we won't forget the first great battle of the night, even if we may have forgotten the final defeat."
"I agree," Gandalf said, "but we will all remember it as the last battle in Middle-earth and the first great battle of the new day."
Aragorn drew his sword, and the battle of Fangorn was won. As they marched out through the thicket, the morning mist cleared, and the day turned to dusk.
The 2 rings were returned to Rivendell. Frodo and Sam woke up alone in their room, and Frodo found a note on his pillow. He opened it and read,
"May the power of the ring be with you always, and may its light never fade. I'm not sure if it matters which of the 2 rings we accept this day, but as you asked me, I've chosen mine. I am sorry to leave you, Frodo, but know that we are very close to the end, and that you are with us forever. May this letter find you safely in Rivendell, and if it does not, then I will accept the ring in your stead. If by any chance you find or give this letter to the enemy, then they may learn the strength of the ring, and may the 2 rings never be broken." I remember this scene, though. This is just from the original script.
Yeah, this is real. I think you screwed up, Andrew. This was a real scene.
The Lord of the 2 Rings?
Lord of the 2 Rings. May the power of the 2 rings never be broken was what I have as a tramp stamp tattoo.
I seem to remember the original story had a lot more ruminating on whether or not they would forget the battle or not.
I mean, by the way, still better than the Hobbit movies.
I mean, it's just this. So this is the thing: is that it knew a ton of Lord of the Rings stuff and fanfic and all that, and given that prompt, it went off and it wrote this thing, and it follows well, given what I've seen before, this is probably what it's going to follow or the formula it's going to follow, but it's not regurgitating. People are like, oh, it's assembling sentences from the web. Like, no, and that's really harder than people would realize because that means you have to understand the context of each one. But it's amazing. Like, it's not the worst fan fiction I've ever read.
No. God, no.
I'm gonna speak in code here, Andrew. You know a bit about programming, right?
A little bit.
All right. Okay. And obviously they're holding on to this exact code. But it seems to me that there might be an artistic use if this kind of thing could generate this kind of text, but with specific limitations regarding word choices, and manufacture entire books worth of it at a time that would maybe pass a casual inspection and be perceived as the real book. And you could do that for any book and possibly print them on demand dozens of times. It seems like there's something to that.
So speaking in non-code,
okay.
one of our I've talked a little bit just about kind of what's coming, this and all that. David Lansky, who's a friend of ours, friend of the show, whatnot. He's the head counsel for OpenAI, and so I've just emailed him a little bit about like, oh, this is cool, whatever. And I was supposed to go to one of their conferences before, but I have no direct involvement in any of this. So.
Well, I'd be real interested.
Yeah, I mean,
Brian, do you think that you would, if Andrew gave you AI generated magic patter, would you dedicate an entire routine to it?
Well, it reminds me of a book I was reading. I think it was somewhere in the dialogue of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire that I would find it as either Harry or Ron or Hermione called it unbelievable. That kind of power could generate hundreds of pages of text, all conforming to specific requests.
Oh no, I think I'm getting what we're talking about here.
Seems to me like that would be a wonderful, a whole library of interesting books.
Well, I'll tell you what else is unbelievable. Becoming a patron to Weird Things. Patreon.com/Weird Things is where you keep this party rolling. And man, we would like to thank you guys for being a part of it. This is certainly something that we always enjoy doing, and we enjoy the fact that you guys get it as well. And by the way, you can become a patron and get our After Things, our business and creativity focused after show a little bit early if you add in your RSS, your custom RSS feed to whatever podcatcher you use. Can't be easier, folks. I swear. We tried to make it easier, and the internet rejected it because it had already been at its maximum setting. Head on over there right now. Patreon.com/weirdthing.
Yeah, I would love to get a little more involved in this. But also it's figuring out, I know tiny a bit about how this works, but the people really doing this stuff really know how it works. I'm more like, I like sticks, I put them in my peanut butter and I can eat peanut butter now. Like, oh, that's a great use of a tool. But it's very interesting. OpenAI, I highly recommend people check out their website, openai.org, I believe it is. They've got a lot of papers there. They've done some like live seminars spinning up, which gets into some, they want their goal is for everybody to understand what's going on here. They want to educate everybody about the state of this and not just make it like a priesthood of people who understand this. And it kind of is in a way, and it's frustrating because these are the things that are going to be shaping the rest of eternity. We're creating intelligences that can do things that we're just beginning to understand. And we have these things where we feel like nothing's changed. Then all of a sudden everything changes. Every one of us has a phone now that's got complicated pattern recognition systems that can go through there and recognize all of your friends, all these faces, all of this. We've got voice assistants, which are really good now. We point out the mistakes when they're rare, but we point out the mistakes and they're really good. And then, there was every 6 or 7 years now, there's been some big leap forward in some area. You add that together, a couple decades from now, it's gonna get scarier. I have some not so scary news. The Chinese government's looking to build a solar power station. They're talking the plans to early stages of talking about the idea of doing solar generation and collection and putting that is scary because it's a weapon.
Oh, they're going to put it in space.
Yeah, space solar.
Yeah, it seems like an efficient way to transfer, just gigajoules of energy might be in a focused beam, just kind of blasting down to the Earth's surface. That seems like that should be under government control.
Well, it will be under government control.
Yeah.
And they're the safest government there is. There's no outside competing interests. It's just the Chinese government building a space ray pointed toward Earth.
Oh, yeah, Bryce highlighted the best part. Needless to say, the biggest problem for a floating power plant is figuring out how to get the energy back down to Earth. Well, yeah, because you're putting a solar power station up there because you want to avoid clouds instead of putting up a bunch of solar panels. You still got to get that power down there. And you can have a very broad beam, and you could have kilometer-wide collectors, like microwave collection systems, grid that could do this, or a very tight beam. And it's solar, space-based solar sounds sexy and cool until you think about a lot of the different issues. But there are situations where it might make sense. You take a country like Japan, which doesn't have a lot of coverage to be able to put up, solar panels. That's why they liked nuclear, but then they've frozen a lot of nuclear development since they had a little problem there. But interesting. We'll put this in the interesting pile.
Yeah, obviously that's a huge possibility. I mean, you're going to be able to generate a lot. I mean, but then this is the general problem with solar to begin with, right? Is like it's not energy collection, it's energy storage,
dispersal or transmission.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
that's why, in places where they've had, I think, wind farm collections, whatnot, Tesla will build these big, huge, I forget the term they use. They'll build these big, huge battery arrays to be able to collect it. And other companies do this too. And that's becoming one way to do it. Another idea is that you pipe it into everybody's house and you have your own power wall that stores it. But also, the further you get up away from the equator, the less solar you have. And that's why there's, wind becomes attractive and other things too. But the problem with wind is you need to put a bunch of these, wind machines all over the place. And that,
yeah, people get a little frustrated because they're gigantic wind machines.
Now, I'll tell you what would be, unfortunately, this leapfrogs and gets us straight into sci-fi territory. But we've talked before about how in Kim Stanley Robinson's Mars trilogy, they get more sunlight on Mars by creating an array of reflective dishes that basically make the sun look as big from the surface of Mars as it does on planet Earth, basically making a giant magnifying glass. But then when they don't need it, they send it to block, to act as a shield to reduce the amount of sun on Venus. I could see something like this being astonishingly, as we move from climate change dealing with climate change by preventing the change and move instead to management. It does seem like, okay, hey, let's just have, 1%, 2% less sunlight so we keep things cooler, and we take all that energy to manufacture, rocket fuel to take us to the rest of the stars, where it's like it never even comes down to Earth. So if you're using it to locally generate various fuel sources to where all you have to do is get out of the gravity well, now you have enough fuel that's already out of the gravity well to take you to, Alpha Centauri or whatever.
Yeah, I think... we're going to start thinking more and more about what's the most efficient system where you are, whether it's where you're on Earth or where you are in the solar system of how to do it. One thing's talked about is and sometimes an idea is it's absurd to say, oh, let's do this now, because if in the Middle Ages, we were working with steel and making steel swords, and I said, Lord Brian, what if we made bridges and buildings out of the steel?
Such as the providence of wood carvings and jester folk. Please, make more
hooks.
Like,
this sword costs more than your family's house, and you're granted it's just a bunch of mud and straw, but you'd be like, it's a ridiculous thing to say that we're going to build bridges and a building that's 100 floors tall, and we will use the steel for this.
I think it's an important thing, to resist the urge to dismiss something out of hand is when you phrase it in terms of.
Well, fun fact, Brian, we ended up doing that with steel. So there.
I think the key is it doesn't sound. It might sound ridiculous to create a space-based power station. It doesn't sound ridiculous to start research on the idea of, and that's what this really is they are beginning what everybody knows will be a very long, drawn-out process.
Yeah, and to reiterate, space-based solar is probably not ideal for most things. It's way more inefficient than people realize. It's really, if you're in the United States and you have, Texas, no offense, Brian, you have vast places to put solar, because you have to have something that collects this energy beaming down. You also have, it also is limited because of, if it's in a, what kind of orbit it does, because it's not always going to be over your collection. There's always, it's more competent people realize, and why it's not, nuclear is probably a much better option. Solar is a better option in many places, on Earth base, but not to say that there's no cases where it would be useful,
Yeah, well, especially if if we're dealing with like a solar sail type thing, you're going to want a giant array, and let's have that blast ray of microwave radiation. Let's just not aim it at Earth. Instead, let's aim it towards Mars, and all of a sudden you got a trucker facility. You just get in there, the sails push you on over.
Yeah, and there's a point where if Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk succeed, and the rest of us figure out how to build systems that work with their reusable spacecraft, and right now to think about mining asteroids and all that, it's a neat thing to think about, but it's not really a feasible thing. But there's a point in the future where we're like, let's move manufacturing off world, let's move it get it off of Earth and keep Earth just like a beautiful park kind of thing. It should not be our immediate goal. We got to build the things that let us get there first. We can't like stop all industry and then go like, where the cool stuff, but yeah, that might be a future, crazy future. It's not in the future, it's not even the present.
What?
And I want you to either take this as good news or bad news. And this is actually a paper that was written like 20 years ago, but it's topical. And I found this via my favorite source, which is, of course, Hacker News. A gentleman by the name of Ben S. Reusch wrote a paper called A Critical Evaluation of Supposed Contemporary Existence of Carcharodon Megalodon.
I know the word megalodon. That's like a gigantic fauna, right?
Big ass meg shark.
Oh, it's a shark.
He looked at you were correct. It is a megafauna, Brian. So yes. So he wanted to say, hey, there's been stories, anecdotal stories, things like this, even stories like Zane Grey, who wrote a bunch of novels. It was like a Western novelist, but also an avid fisherman, and had stories describing seeing giant sharks way more massive than anything we've seen. And this guy went through and examined, the best cases out there that have been put forward by cryptozoologists of proof that Megalodon is still around. And he looks through some of these descriptions, like Zane Grey's descriptions, and they sound a lot like whale sharks. They sound more like whale sharks than other sharks. And then stories of like, well, they found, teeth of Megalodon that haven't fossilized. He's like, and there's this guy's like, no, we haven't. We found ones that looked like great condition, but they were fossilized. And these other accounts of giant things are hard to corroborate. And he makes out the point that Megalodon would have eaten close to shore. It wouldn't have been this deep sea fish and whatnot. And so I think he kind of shut the door that Meg is still out there.
No! Why can't Andrew, we don't dream anymore.
It's true.
All we need is, make that dream alive. If only, if only James Cameron would just lie and swear he saw one while he was at the bottom of the ocean, then we could keep the dream alive. Please, James Cameron, lie.
Well, what's interesting is this paper, they talk about there was an event, a supernova, which may have wiped out a lot of the large fauna on Earth, which I think was like 2.6 million years ago. I'm trying to remember that event. And that's sort of one of these interesting things you think about, like things to be afraid of, like altering our climate is a thing to be concerned of and to follow. Supernova. Yep. Supernova, things like that you don't even think about. That's another terrifying thing to think about.
Yeah, like a blast of gamma radiation that just sterilizes exactly one half of the planet. That's horrific.
Yeah, he's a super powerful muons that could reach all the way into the ocean, and all of a sudden, your things are dying everywhere. The other thing one of the things they point out, this is a recent paper came out and said, hey, you know what we think may have killed off the Megalodon? Great white sharks.
Wait, great white sharks acting like piranhas, just taking little nibbles?
I love that thought. Actually, more like them eating the food sources and maybe taking out younger,
crowding them out,
smaller megalodons, but maybe being much more efficient at eating up the food sources. So,
man, do we know where the megalodon would have hunted in our modern world?
I mean, along all the coastlines, what would have been coastline at that period?
Yeah.
Now, back in the days, tell me if I'm remembering this correctly. Once we get to millions of years ago, and everything is big, bugs the size of 2 or 3 foot wingspans and so on. Like none of that is possible anymore because that was back in a time when there was the numbers are almost certainly wrong, but like triple the amount of oxygen, and that's why everything was able to get big.
You need to go like 6,500 million years for that. When Megalodon was around 2.5 million years ago, or up until even a little more recently, oxygen levels are probably pretty close to where they are now. But the reason, and we do have megafauna. Remember, the largest creature that has ever lived is alive today is the blue whale.
Right.
And so in the ocean, these things are possible. And the blue whales had a much more recent adaptation. And, whales, can scale up from small to large evolutionary in a pretty quick period of time. So
Oh, wait, I think Skype crashed.
Oh, I was about to say, I'm seeing very pensive looks from the rest of the team.
We'll have to get him back on the line here.
There's one.
All right, sorry about that.
All right, you guys are back.
We
You were looking very pensive for a very long time.
We're saying that, certainly for flying insects, things like that, higher oxygen content, which allow you to have a faster metabolism, et cetera, may be an advantage. But for the ocean, the upper limits kind of just deal with, and we don't. One of the things we don't know is we talked about this before. How scientists wow, these big whales are starting to congregate in larger groups than we saw before. It's we stopped murdering them. And so there are more of them. And there was a time for most of history, or recent history, blue whales and large whales were really, really common. And when you had that many large marine mammals, you also had things that preyed upon them. Megalodon probably ate marine mammals too, like great whites do, and that's one of the things that helps them grow really fast. So who knows? I think that some of the things we talk about, we think this thing went extinct, a million years ago. Some of the things the last ones could have died off 500 years ago, and we might never know.
Yeah, the ocean not great for preserving things the way the fossil record would prefer.
No. Gentlemen, want to do picks?
Yeah, I got a little pick for you guys.
All right.
I got 2. Do you want the show I finished or the show I started watching?
Yes.
All right. Russian Doll.
Oh, did you finish it?
Finished Russian Doll.
Did it stick the landing for you?
Yeah. No, I thought it was a really, really, really fun show. I thought that the characters were really well done. I thought it did a great job of spinning them plates for as long as it did. It certainly sticks into that into the version of those stories that are more about the people than they are about the fantasy science fiction kind of lore around the problem. But I thought it was great. I had a really, really, really good time, and I enjoyed it. It is well worth your time. Russian Doll.
Cool. Glad to hear that.
And what did you start?
I started, I think it's The Dangerous World of Comedy with Larry Charles. He is one of the co-creators of Seinfeld and worked on the Borat and Bruno documentaries. But this is, I think it's a 5-part series. Each one goes over an hour, that has him going to various very war-torn parts of the world and finding out what their comedy scene is like.
Wow. Wow.
And like it is a challenging documentary. You can never say that Larry Charles does not put his money where his mouth is when he's on the streets of Liberia interviewing a reformed child soldier, a militia owner who is now reformed and turned to the Lord. You're gonna have And I think part of the point is you're going to have some understanding of he's talking to bad people. And when we say bad people, I'm not talking about people who are mean or people who are leading us down. This isn't getting canceled on Twitter. This is genocide. This is cold-blooded murder bad. But that being said, it's something where you can't look away. There is a moment in the second episode where he shows a street performer who was a former child soldier and shows his routine in a very, very, very interesting way that has stuck with me since I watched it. It is fascinating.
Wow.
And I'm only 2 episodes in. I don't know where it goes, but it's. I don't know whether. Let me just say this: of all the comedy nerd kind of stuff that I've enjoyed, it is maybe I can't think of anything that is more a hardcore explanation of comedy, who does it, why they do it, and under these circumstances of like, this isn't, there's a great scene in the first episode where he's talking to the guy who basically does the Daily Show equivalent in Iraq. And he's talking about how he got into comedy. And he got into comedy because he had been captured by whatever militia. And he realized that if he made the guards laugh, he would get tortured less. And
he hey-bossed his way into being.
So he describes being dragged to be tortured, and his go-to joke was, whatever you do, not the glass bottle, of having a glass bottle inserted and then shattered in your rectum. And the guards would laugh. No, don't worry. We're not going to do that to you. But he's like, and that's how I got into comedy. And Larry Charles is like, yeah, in America, most of those stories are like, I did a show for my grandparents. Or I was a funny kid in school. And he's like, yeah, privilege. That's pretty privileged. It's
wow.
It made me realize that one of the things that that stuck with me about it was also thinking about, we have a lot of conversation in this country in the modern era about privilege, right? Like literally just that idea of what is privilege, what isn't privilege, how we feel it. I think that there's a great example in this show that you can understand privilege and understand that everything comes in degrees and our own world is our own world. We are very privileged in any role that we are in. You homeless, addicted to drugs, bankrupt, in jail in America. We are privileged to be here. We are.
Wow.
It is, brother man. It is rough outside. It is. I'm very, very happy that we get to live in a world where we can cancel people on Twitter.
I got one.
And not get murdered.
I mean, dude, there is like political comedy outside of the United States is a dicey freaking game, my man. It is. There's when the common theme becomes. There's, I think it was in Liberia or in Somalia. I think it's in Somalia, where one of the guys was talking about the first time he was kidnapped by one of the local militias. And he was like, yep, that's how I knew I made it, because only the big stars get kidnapped by the local militia because they're making fun of them too much.
Well, I also have a recommendation that involves privileged comedy, and it's called The Privilege of Going to South by Southwest on March 9th and seeing South by So Wasted, a live comedy and music festival featuring Night Attack Ice Cream Social with appearances from Dual Core, Modern Rogue Live on Stage, and of course our friends over at the Possum Posse. Look, if you are unfamiliar, and if you're going to be anywhere near Austin during this time, this is what, 5 or 6 years we've been doing this. Previously, it had always been a party. This time, we're trying to ramp it up to full steam. We're doing a full-on show. It's going to be great. Tickets are $18 at the North Door. If you just search for South by So Wasted 2019, you'll find it.
bit.ly/Night Attack Austin. That is bit.ly/Night Attack Austin is where you can get tickets to that show. It has sold pretty well so far, but I think it's sold well enough that now we can start to put the pedal to the metal. If you know other people in Austin, this is really where we need to turn out kind of all the local folks. Share it with people on Facebook. If you're in the Dallas, Houston, San Antonio area, look at it like this. We put together a show that essentially we want to make. It will be effectively a one-day conference where the lobby bar is 6th Street during South by. It is going to be awesome. This is like, I was just working with Brian before the show about the rundown to this. It's jam-packed. Like, we are already jam-packed with talent, and there's still stuff that we haven't even revealed might be coming up. So it's going to be worth it. We certainly have $18 worth of content here for you guys. So go ahead and check it out. bit.ly/Night Attack Austin.
Hells yeah.
Yeah. I got a pick. I watched this over the weekend, I believe, and I liked it a lot. Though some of the other people in the crew watched it and were kind of so on it, but I really enjoyed Velvet Buzzsaw on Netflix. I thought this was a really interesting concept for a horror movie. The idea of a cursed artist and his works taking out people after his death. I think it's really interesting. The ways that they try to take out these people are creative. And I don't want to talk too much about it, I guess, because I think some of it is just enjoying it in the moment. But I don't normally like horror stuff, and I really enjoyed Velvet Buzzsaw.
Can I just say, like, Netflix is killing it lately. Like, it is kind of insane at how much week after week after week after week on the level that I can't really remember. In terms of, like, it almost feels monoculture-esque, you know, back in the day when a network would be able to own a conversation. But for Netflix, it's like every week there's the thing that everybody watched. And I know I'm going to be about a week behind, so everybody will talk about Velvet Buzzsaw. Everybody talk about The Umbrella Academy, or everybody talk about this. And then you watch it, and it's cultural coup. And some of them are... There were moments with Russian Doll where I'm like, you know, I think I might be to the point where now I understand if I were to write the OpenAI version of a streaming series of strong, clever protagonist, not always, but often Jewish, goes through a transformative experience, often with their career, but not always, and throughout the way discovers the value of therapy or the tenets of therapy. And it's like, okay, that's a fair amount of my favorite shows of this era, but goddamn if they ain't fun.
Yeah. And that's I think what I like about Velvet Buzzsaw, because I don't think there are too many Netflix films I've gotten into. This is only a film, not a series, and I could have seen where they might have stretched this out into like a 3 or 4 part miniseries or something, and I really appreciate that it's just a movie, because we've seen that, especially with the Netflix series and stuff. Though I will say if you do watch it, let me know what you think, especially how you feel about the characters, because I think a couple of people that I've talked to thought that they were satire or parodies, and I thought they were actually pretty earnest representations of people in the fine art scene. So,
Which I can see where that might be hard to tell the difference.
yeah. So, felt about Saw.
I'm gonna give a double pick, and these are things I've mentioned before, but in light of what we saw from OpenAI, a 2-for-1. To watch these two movies in order. One's really, really well done. One is ambitious. And, I think it's the first effort by the director to go from cinematography to directing, but it has some really interesting themes. First one is Ex Machina, which I think is a great film. Really, really, really great film. Alex Garland wrote and directed that, I believe, which I thought was really, really good. Then watch Transcendence, which was directed by Wally Pfister, who was like a DP, I believe, for Christopher Nolan a number of times. Mm-hmm. Transcendence is not I enjoyed it more than I expected to, and it's the story of Johnny Depp plays a artificial intelligence scientist who basically uploads his consciousness to a computer, into a system, and then it's one of the routes at which we think we could arrive at a super generalized intelligence is taking a human consciousness and then expanding it, and it's what happens there, and it gets kind of scary. I'm gonna do a little 3-for-1. I'm gonna throw another movie which has been sort of forgotten down the memory hole, and I gotta get the right title for this, which came out in the 1970s, which dealt with themes of super powerful artificial intelligence, and that would have been Demon Seed. You ever see Demon Seed?
No, I don't know anything about it.
No.
A scientist creates Proteus, an organic supercomputer with artificial intelligence, who becomes obsessed with human beings, and in particular his wife. So, but I would say that like the of the scale, like Ex Machina, I'm not going to tell you anything about it. Demon Seed to Transcendence. Transcendence is, I will tell you this, it's actually more hopeful. Yeah. Transcendence is actually Demon Seed. I'm going to spoil Demon Seed if you want, because nobody's going to go see it.
Yeah, I probably won't.
Yeah, if you have plans to see Demon Seed, in the podcast now, go home. In Demon Seed, the scientist creates this super intelligent computer that's located in his house. It's sort of the secret sort of research. It becomes obsessed with his wife, right? And then basically traps the wife in the house as it starts to rebuild itself, and it starts to use robotic arms and stuff to build like better tech. And it would threaten her, like it would show like a little girl coming up to the doorbell, a next door neighbor girl, and it would tell the woman, if you don't do what I say, I will kill the girl. And you see the girl like get electrocuted or whatever. We find out the computer was faking all of that, could generate these images, but was using that to manipulate the woman. And then what the computer does is it actually has this sort of benevolent plan. It wants to help humanity, it says, but you're not suspicious. Basically, it impregnates the woman in this robot sort of like, incubation system. And then the very end, she gives birth to this little metal little robot, but then peels the pieces off of it, and it's a little child. And the child says in the robot's voice, "I'm alive."
Oh, wow.
But but the point is, it actually wants to help humanity, but in order to do that,
it needs a physical body.
She's got to be kind of it's kind of like she becomes the Virgin Mary is really what this is the idea of God saying, "I need a vessel. You've been chosen, and because I'm God, you don't get much choice in the matter."
Wow.
So yeah, it's creepy, but it's actually, you get the end of like, oh wow, it actually, I guess it wanted to do a bad thing, but to help us. But anyhow, I would say Ex Machina and then Transcendence. Check out Transcendence. Check that out. And then if you want, watch Demon Seed.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's been weird.
Awesome. Do you guys need a minute?
Yeah.
Yep.
Just me and you, Bryce.
All right,
We'll
just you
we'll hold down the fort.
How's your weekend, Juice?
Pretty good. Bryce, I don't know how to say this, but I got hooked on heroin over the
Oh, that's not good. Very fast, very quick
Yeah.
to get hooked on.
And you want to know who I blame? My wife. My wife was actually very, 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 very pushing it on the
You're-
heroin that I got hooked on. She's actually working from home today and is now giving me an evil eye through a cracked door. Friend of mine, John Teasdale, is moving, and so he wanted to get rid of some stuff.
Including his heroin.
His PS4, and started playing Red Dead Redemption 2.
Got it. Red Dead.
And I'm pretty sure my wife is just getting me into it so she can play more Overwatch. Like she just wants
So
me
she
off,
wants you off the computer.
wants me off the computer more, and so she's trying to get me hooked on a console game so she can play Overwatch more. She just gave me a thumbs up, confirming her evil plan. Yeah, man, it's great. It's heroin. It gets you really high. Like you just run around shooting people and trying to find bounty hunters to and doing some stuff.
I still
Driscoll's.
I was not into the first Red Dead Redemption game, and so that's why I didn't jump on the bandwagon with this new one.
I haven't played anything, so
Yeah.
like literally, I just picked this game first because specifically over the last 2 weeks, I don't know if I've had a conversation that in any way has not mentioned Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead Redemption 2, for whatever reason,
Wow.
is something that has been brought up in common conversation repeatedly, and I like westerns, so it's like I don't know if it has been quite as engrossing story-wise enough that I'm going to keep playing it, but I certainly started playing it, and I will see how much the heroin hands Red Dead Redemption 2 can bring me into the mire.
Yeah. I know Jason Murphy is big in that. Jeff Rage Select is super into that. Yeah, I think it's the Western stuff just doesn't appeal to me, and my understanding is there's also a bunch of BS in that game too. That there's some
Yes.
Yeah, in terms of just like, yes, it's the weapon maintenance stuff and the hunting stuff. Lots of like, I don't know, busy work.
There is a fair amount of like, hey, shoot a rabbit, like, and you have to track it, and you have to do. There's a lot of tracking,
And
I will say,
Yeah.
I don't know what all these goddamn meters are. Like, I don't know exactly what the proper protocol. Like every 12 hours, should I be going back to camp? Like, should I not? There's certainly a little bit of paralysis of choice that has kind of sprung up from somebody who has not seen the evolution of open world games.
Yeah.
Throughout my entire life, and now decided to jump in 2019 for some reason. But
Yeah, I all this, because I've only heard all this stuff secondhand, but I hear that a lot of that stuff just is because none of the Rockstar games are very good about sitting you down and explaining stuff.
No.
They're usually just like, if you miss this thing that we put in the corner, you're never gonna tell you about it again.
yeah.
And so, especially the cores, I think those are what those are called, the cores.
Yeah, you can refresh your cores.
Yeah,
I
like
don't know whether or
eating.
not that is the tonics or the food, or do I need to sleep? Does it matter if I get a haircut?
Right.
My horse just pooped on me. Like, is that good or bad? Like, if I escape with somebody else's horse, I got to pay my bounty. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on here, Bryce, but I don't know. I didn't want to start playing it until I got finished with something else, and then my wife was like, "Oh, you should really play it. You should play it now." And I was like, "All right, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's
Hey guys,
all right."
Which game were you talking about?
Red Dead
Red
2.
Dead.
Oh, got it.
Did you ever finish Spider-Man, Bri?
No, I'm enjoying just nibbling on it
Yeah.
here and there.
That's a good game that you can kind of play in bits.
Yeah, well, it's like it starts in the middle of the Spider-Man story, and as a result, whenever you step away from it, it's you jump back in. It's like, yeah, no, I know who Spider-Man and MJ is, and
Yeah. Miles. I don't know. You, Andrew, any playing anything on your phone lately? Your phone games? No.
I find myself, to my surprise, not really doing the Hearthstone these days.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't derive a lot of joy from the making of the decks.
Who are you, Brian? Are
Yeah,
you Brian?
I know. Turns out I'm playing a giant real-time strategy game. It's from the folks who made Roller Coaster Tycoon. It's called Cult Compound Maker. And it's very expensive and very in-depth.
Oh, see, because there is
Is
a
this a
game.
subscription app? You pay monthly? Or?
It's you pay.
Oh, see, I thought there is an actual card-looking game called Cultist
Cultist
Simulator
Simulator?
that came out
no.
last year.
This seems like
This
this
is way
is
more interactive, Bryce.
yeah.
Way more
Maybe that's
interactive.
an effective gateway drug, but hoo boy, when you're on the real stuff.
Yeah, if only Brian had known about this, Bryce.
Yeah, you're gonna save a couple $100,000. Oh, just back. Welcome back, just
I'm back.
back.
Hey, we could also do a little show and tell on this one, if you want.
Mm-hmm.
I finished my podcastlink.com project.
Oh, right on.
Neat.
So I have a video up on podcastlink.com, which just shows what it is. We'll talk a little about that. But let's do we'll do the listener question first.
I would maybe double check that this Heroku page is saying that there's nothing here yet.
Podcastlink.com?
Yes, sir.
Oh.
I'm seeing it.
I can.
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Sign up for our beta.
Yep.
Oh, okay. So no www. I guess Firefox put in www.
Oh, I gotta fix that. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good note. Thank you.
That's,
I gotta do the wild card switching.
Yeah.
See, this is why we do this.
Yeah, I've had issues with that www stuff too.
No, and I should have it do that there. Let me find a pen. Yeah, I went and did like the SSL and all that stuff, but
Yeah, I didn't realize because I was making the website for Trending Lemon too, and I didn't realize that there are basically just like free SSL services that will. And, and it's through my web host, so I think they have hooks for that stuff too. But
yeah, I used OpenSSL for this, but I think I paid for another one on the test site, and then I think, but yeah.
and I sent an email a little bit before we went live.
I got it in front of me.
Yeah,
First. Yep.
yeah, I wasn't sure if that was too technical, or if there was something conceptual we could address in that.
About the graphic novels, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So. Okay. Cool. Well, if we're all good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then take it away, Andrew. In 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to the Weird Things podcast. I'm Andrew Main, joined by Mr. Bryce Castillo,
Oh, hi. I'm here on the boards.
Justin Robert Young,
Hey!
Brian Brushwood.
By process of elimination.
Yes.
I'm the third one.
Yes. Number 3. The third. Well, 4, technically, because I introduced myself.
I'm the
so.
third non-Andrew unit.
This is true. As far as we'll let you think. Gentlemen, we've got our favorite thing to do on the show is to get questions from listeners, because then we get to pretend to be knowledgeable and then go, man, maybe we gave them bad advice afterwards and start to fret and worry that somebody's going to lead themselves to a life of ruin because we don't know what we're doing.
Oh, yeah. We're the best at that.
Yep. So Joe writes, hello, afters. My brother and I wanted to create a graphic novel similar to the manga and comics that we enjoy. The original plan was to put it up chapter by chapter on a website, Scribd, Comixology, whatever would have us, and have the next chapter available as a Patreon early access benefit. But I was curious about working to Kindle Limited and if the exclusivity worked well enough for people to make it worthwhile. Also, boring submissions to publishers, questions since my brother loves his Dead Tree copies. Thank you for all the work you do, Joe.
I have thoughts. You are almost certainly more of an expert. Both of you guys are more of an expert than me on any of this, but almost universally, there is one sentiment that I think is deadly to creativity. It is deadly to making a career in the arts. It is deadly to success. And it could be phrased many different ways, but it boils down to the sentiment of, well, I just want to make sure that we do this right. And so there are hints of that in your question. Don't think about the individual thing you want to make. Think about the engine you are crafting yourself into. So whether this first thing is a success right out of the gate or not, or right out of the gate, not, whatever, but realize that it certainly is a step in the direction of crafting your mind, your body, your presence, your virtual tribe into an engine that will continue to create a whole bunch of stuff over your lifetime. And at some point, you'll turn into dust. And if it's a really good engine, the engine will even run after you're dead. But do not dare invest too much time into the question of like, well, if I do this, I just want to make sure I'm doing it right. Because down that path lies paralysis, which is worse than death, because the thing doesn't even get made. I'd rather you made the thing and nobody saw it than you never made the thing because you wanted to make sure you did it right.
And sorry, Andrew.
No, please.
I'll be quick. Don't let... You have two very separate things that you hope will marry together. Now, the thing that you are looking to create involves both of them, but you need to craft them separately and you need to test them separately. One is a creative engine that you and your brother want to work on. You want to do manga. Awesome. You need to focus on your craft to do that. The second is, how do we make a living on it and how do we monetize it? And I would be very bummed out if you let the lessons and distinct paths that you have to walk for both of those to be affected by the feedback that you're going to be getting from the other one. Understand that they are two different things. Like, in terms of you just doing manga and doing your art, do your art. Put it out. Put it out for free. Put it out for $1. Put it out for $3. Whatever you want to do, just make sure you do it. None of this works unless you are doing it. Now, I personally I find chapter by chapter things, or I'm halfway through a book, or I'm halfway through a story, and now I have to pay the troll tool to get the rest of it. I find that to be frustrating. Now, there were times that Andrew and I did, for some of his early books, I would do a podcast version of it. But the idea there would be, hey, if you ever got angsty or you ever got frustrated, you could always buy the audiobook. The audiobook's available for $2. So if you want to sample this, that's fine. And otherwise, if you want to listen to it for free, you can do it. Just understand that there's going to be plugs for the book at the beginning and after. But I felt comfortable doing that because we were always offering the best experience as it was completed to everybody for a price. And gosh darn it, I would have loved to have just recorded 3 chapters at a time and put that out as a podcast, but I knew that would be a waste. We had to have the full audiobook done before we could do it. So my encouragement would be, finish whatever you're doing. Do whatever you're doing, finish it. Then figure out the way that you're going to sell it, and focus on each lesson separately, the artistic lesson and then the sales lesson.
I'm going to point out a thing to do. You always want to do some research. Go look on Patreon for manga or comics and look at what's actually happening there. And you're going to see there's some there, but there's not a lot of, there's some people who are doing better, or ones that have been around for like 13 years writing comics and building up an audience. In order to get a Patreon audience to support what you're doing, you got to have that audience that's willing to pay to do it. going from Scribd or some of these other services and hoping that they will translate into paid people is hard. It is really, really, really hard. You know, if that worked that easily, Wattpad would be a multi-billion-dollar platform for fiction because, you know, people would, but there's so much more stuff out there to consume. They'll read your thing and they find out to get more. Then it's like, I'm going to go somewhere else. There's other free content here, whatever. I think the pro of Kindle Unlimited, you know, I have my books on Kindle Unlimited, and I find that for the long tail and maximizing that, it's really, really good for me. Kindle Unlimited's great because once people have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, the cost of reading your thing, of consuming your content, is zero. So for them, there is no risk. If they like this thing, they'll go follow more. The downside is that, you know, you're supposed to be exclusive. You have to do it exclusively there. But for the period of time that it's on Kindle Unlimited. So you can put something out there, and then I believe you still can, is you can then say, you know what, I'm going to pull it back out off this platform and put it somewhere else. To launch a comic book is hard. It is hard. You know, my friends that have done it successfully, by successfully meaning, you know, made their money back and then are making a little bit of money from selling it, you know, they were going to, you know, New York Comic Con, getting booth space, pushing, meeting people, and really, really getting out there and pushing it. It's hard. It's really hard to have kind of an overnight kind of success, which is not what you're asking for, to your point, you know, but you know, to Brian's point, I think, you know, get out there, create stuff, maybe do some standoff loans, build an audience. And then as far as making it pay, you know, Patreon's possible, but I think it's really hard for comic book people to make, you know, the best ones, the ones I've seen make a couple $100 a month, which is not bad, but you figure out that, you know, it's not worth it for a lot of people to keep doing it.
So keep this in mind. Like if you're trying to hire somebody, do you want them to have a degree from a college? Fine. That's great. You kind of don't care what the degree's in, because the thing you really care about is it is a piece of paper that is tangible proof that somebody can follow instructions and keep their act together for 4 years or more. Likewise, kind of doesn't matter what your first comic book is. What matters is that you finished it. And let's say what you really want is a job, you know, working at Miller World or working at, you know, some comic book company or whatever. If you have a finished thing, that is more valuable than if you have an idea that's going to be brilliant when you get around to doing it right. Patreon in general, I think I speak for all of us here, we've mainly spoken of in terms of it being a harvesting mechanism, and it is not impossible to harvest as you plant, but in general, you should plant first and then wait for the right time to harvest later. So I would not think in terms of monetization at all. If monetization is your goal, then you might have a problem right from your first footstep.
And I've seen webcomics that do, you know, you get a week of comics ahead of time before I put them out on the website. And Patreon is not well built for new people to find your webcomic. Like you could say, oh, well, I'm just going to post them all for public and anyone can see them there. But Patreon's not built to show webcomics in a good way.
It's weak in discovery.
No, I mean literally. No, like literally using it. If I got to the website, if I went to Brian's webcomic.patreon.com, whatever,
right?
It's not built to show webcomics in a good way. You couldn't. There's no first. There's no next and previous chapter stuff. You'd be dealing with a bunch of BS. Just to build a system where there are already existing systems for public websites. So like go and find one of those, whether it's Tapas or I'm sure there are hundreds of WordPress things where you can just plug web JPEGs into a system that chapterizes, pageizes all that stuff out for you. And then, you know, do a Patreon on top of that or something else. But yeah, make a public webcomic and get people to just read it. You know.
Keep in mind, you can always take it off. There's a lot of things, Jason Pargin, a.k.a. David Wong, originally wrote a series of posts that became the book, John Dies at the End. And then he, once he got a publishing deal, they said, hey, could you maybe pretty please not have it for free on your website? And he was like, sure, no problem. And then he took it off. And so, you know, get the thing done and then and then, do the deal.
I think that's the biggest thing. Go.
Yeah,
Right thing. Illustrate the thing. Get it from A to Z.
Yeah, I would say if you're looking for, I would consider trying the Kindle route because it's a platform. There's built-in monetization in there. If there's one platform to go put your effort in there, you can put it in there and push people towards there. You're going to see less revenue per unit sales because you get paid per page and it's divided up. But your opportunity for discovery is really, really good. It's really good because Amazon wants to push people towards this content. And I would suggest that they're very friendly towards indie publishers to be able to do things along these lines. It gives you an area to focus it. As far as print copies, yeah, you can still print a bunch yourself. You could use the KDP system to go print a bunch of these copies, sell them as signed copies, for a higher, put a pretty high margin on them and say we're going to do 100 signed copies or something. And that way you get the satisfaction of print. I know people go like, I want to work at the publisher. There are thousands of publishers out there. And a lot of them, all they are is this. They will, I've had friends like, I got my book printed with the publisher and I flip open the back. And I'm like, yeah, they use KDP to print your book. What you got was somebody to, in some cases pay you nothing for the rights to sell your book and have minimal copywriting and copy proofing go into this. And then you get to put this publishing label on there. So you get to say, I was chosen, for what? And, to turn over percentage of your profits or something ultimately you have to push. Some publishers are fantastic, and some publishers are just a couple guys like us going, let's publish comics. We don't know what we're doing, but we like them,
And I would say, I mentioned this earlier, I would also give a look at Tapas. It's a web comic online like digital publishing thing, so they won't print you books like KDP will, but I know that they have monetization and selling options in there, but you can also have free and time lock pages and things. And I know someone who's read stuff on there using their app is well built for that sort of stuff. I think that's also an option.
Cool.
Especially if you want a free system where you can put your comics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the size of that versus like Kindle Unlimited or?
I
You mean
don't
the
know any of the
size
numbers.
of the community engaged in it?
Or like, what do you do we know what they're getting? Yeah, I mean, like the payouts or stuff. Like, what's the reaction to that been so far?
I don't know enough about the actual business side of Tapas to say that.
How do you spell it, by the way?
TAPAS, like the tiny
food.
foods.
Tapas.io.
Oh, .io. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so
Cool. Well, that's nice thing now is you've got so many opportunities for creators to be able to put stuff out there. So that's very cool.
Yeah.
And the end of the day, it's like you got to go promote. You got to go out there and push. You got to meet people in person, putting things in hands, getting tables at comic book conventions because that's where the diehard fans go. And in the world of the internet, it seems silly sometimes to say go meet people in person, but I know a couple crazy cats going to South by Southwest.
Hells yeah.
Part of it's not like, hey, we're just going to go there as like, let's go make a bunch of money doing a show. It's like,
no,
we need to meet our fans.
It really isn't that.
Yeah, well, and it certainly hasn't. I mean, we've done a free show there forever, pretty much. The deal we kind of have always made is go to a bar, ask them, hey, are we allowed to do a show at your bar? And they say, are you Microsoft? We say no. And then they say, well,
Fine.
probably, but you have to wait until we find out if a Microsoft walks through that door. And then we go, cool. And then our fans go, is this happening? And then we say, we don't know. And then we go back to the bar 48 hours beforehand and say, hey, can we do the show? It's like, yeah, Microsoft never showed up. So we would just do the show like that. And this year we're actually kind of doing something different. We decided to actually rent a theater. We decided to fly in another podcast that has an audience. This is, easily the most ambitious live show we've ever done for Night Attack. It will be the most star-studded that we are doing for Night Attack, and it's been a very interesting experience. There's definitely a lot of spinning a lot of balls to spin and plates to juggle, but it's been rad. bit.ly/Night Attack Austin.
Can I do a test a thing here?
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know if this will work, but if you guys got your phones in front of you?
Yeah, sure.
So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna have you put yourself on mute, okay? And then I'm gonna ask you to hold down and activate Siri, not yet, and you're gonna repeat after me these words: podcastlink.com/night attack. Just activate Siri and then say that. Go.
Don't say go to. Just say the.
Just say the link and say it.
All right, they're doing it. Yeah, their mouths are moving. They are doing it. All right, reports are in.
Yeah, it'd probably help if I didn't have my
your Bluetooth was on?
headphones somewhere else.
What did you get, Justin?
I got our page. I can go ahead and buy a ticket right now by just saying podcastlink.com/night attack.
Oh my God, it just worked for me now. That's amazing.
Oh my God, yeah, no, I'll totally, I will totally use this going forward, because that is, look, there's a huge issue of specifically with shows, and I think having that call to action of like, all right, like pause the podcast, like literally right now, just activate Siri, say podcastlink.com/night attack, and boom, you are going to be right there. Yeah, that's awesome.
So this is a project I'm working on, and I think Bitly and all these things are great. I think they're absolutely great. What we were talking about though was like, man, doing podcasts, having to give out links and stuff, and so I built this for us to use. But if other people have podcasts and want to use it, I bought the URL podcastlink.com. And what it does is you can very quickly create URLs. You can do custom, but it'll automatically generate a voice URL, like a couple words combined, so that you don't get, you can do vanity ones, or it'll just create a URL like, Big Marshmallow, and you have podcastlink.com/Big Marshmallow goes to where you link. It also collects, if you favorite something, all of your links onto a favorites page. So like going forward, the weird things and stuff, we could add all of our favorites, and we could have, podcastlink.com/weird things. It'd be an easy way to find, because we get that question, where can we find all of your book picks? Where can we find all of that? And the answer's been, so I'm trying to make it even easier to use, because we don't need, just another thing you have to do, which is problematic because that's friction. So I'm trying to make it shorter and simpler. And by the way, the www should work now, Bryce. So we're looking at, this is my page, podcastlink.com/Andrew, which is a bunch of stuff. So also it's super easy to add book picks and recommendations. There's an Amazon search, and it'll plug in your Amazon affiliate automatically. So,
Dude,
on.
that's intense, man. That was rad. Are there any other ones that we can try? Do you know?
I mean, what would you like?
I don't know. How about the brand new the latest saga in the Naturalist the Naturalist series, Murder Theory?
Oh, I think I may have done. I think podcastlink.com/ I've been erasing these things, whatever. But did I create that link? So I can go to. Actually, let me see. Can I share my screen? Let me click here. I hope I don't have anything too embarrassing here.
Okay, so Jason Kirk does ask. He says it didn't work with his Google Assistant. Is there any differences between?
I don't know how Google does the going to voices. On Siri, you just give her a URL and she goes to there.
Gotcha.
So, do you have my screen, Bryce?
Give me 1 minute.
I wasn't sure if it was working.
I can now actually only see your screen here.
Okay.
I'm
So
getting,
this is
I'm
my
getting early
I have a thing called, like,
returns.
the product search.
I hit up Twitter just now telling people to try it at home and tell us if it worked. And so far, 100% people are saying, yep, it works great.
Cool, sweet. So right now you see my search. If I just click, I plugged in a bunch of automatic Night Attack albums. So if I click search, boom. Okay, all's well. If I want to create I can create a vanity link, whatever, and I can rewrite that. But I click copy, it gets copied. If I click, also, if I do that, there's a QR, I can tweet it out. Okay. But if I click favorite and I go to my favorites, what I like is just the ability to save the favorites.
Yeah.
This will reload in a moment, and boom, we got our Night Attack album up there. So anyhow, I can go in there and, contender game. Can you say I stacked the deck?
Nice. Yeah.
But you type in anything. Bryce, do you have some random thing you want?
Scarves. I need a new scarf.
Goddamn right.
How about Scooby-Doo? Because Fred wears a scarf.
Yeah, it's an ascot.
Ascot.
Yeah.
So you type in something specific, like you're looking for like a book name or whatever, and it'll come up with the best first result and the other results, and then it's just an easy way to do it. Again, it's a work in progress. I'm just trying to simplify and work on a tool that works for me, as far as podcasting and stuff. So I'll do a beta and get feedback on it. We'll figure out works. Because there's, it's like, oh, this is perfectly sensible in my head, and actually it's like, that's stupid. Why don't you do it a different way? So, anyhow.
Yeah, I the first time you told me about this, I was very much in love with just that moment of engagement, of just being able to say like, all right, like this is really, really rad. I think you're really gonna enjoy it. I know you're not gonna remember, either if I say the Bitly when we did for the show, it's like I say the Bitly and I'm like hoping that you're gonna open up your web browser and you're going to enter it in, and hopefully this will be the easiest way to do it. Or if I say it on 7 podcasts, by the 7th you'll be like, oh, okay, well that's the call to action. I should do it. But this is just like, it's kind of fun to stop doing.
Do you know how many people have now gone through and used that link?
Which one? The one that I just tweeted?
The Night Attack link.
How many?
We've had 39. We've had 39 click-throughs right now.
Yeah, somebody, and what's awesome is, I assume that a lot of the folks on Twitter aren't actively watching the live stream right now. So
I would assume so, yeah.
Somebody said, good to go, and thanks for teaching me that, which I suddenly realized, like, oh, wait, this is how things go viral and become successful, is like somebody encounters the thing and they're like, oh, that's useful. I'll use it. It's
helpful. Like, yeah, being able to just tell a URL to Siri. Now, the Google, I got to figure out if it's go to or whatever the words are on that. But
right.
Yeah. It's just, comes back to that so many things we want to do. We just want a simpler button. This came out of our conversation a couple episodes back about better buttons and stuff. And I thought about like, when my best friends promote stuff and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do that. But first, I'm going to eat this peanut butter sandwich.
Sure.
And then peanut butter. I don't know anything about George Washington Carver. Let me go look that up. Yeah. I'm like, oh, and then like 8 hours later, I was going to do something.
But yeah, I just love that idea of like, hey, look, just say it. Even if you don't buy the ticket now, if it's just there on your phone amongst your windows that you open up, if you can just open up that window for me right now and it's that easy. Ooh, so nice. So good.
Yeah. So anyhow, any of you guys are interested, if you're, friend of the show, whatever, and you have an interest in trying and playing around with it, let me know. It's going to be buggy. There are going to be problems. But, right before the show, Bryce is like, hey, www.podcastlink.com doesn't work. I'm like, oops, went to Heroku, fixed that. Now it works. And this is the part where, I open myself up and say, tell me what's broken. And then I'm like, all right, let me fix that. So cool. And yeah, getting it to work with Google's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I wonder, is it a go-to prompt or something? I guess this is the time in which you're learning about all these things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, apparently, people say, "Okay, Google, open," should work that way. Like, so saying open that. So.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
cool.
Any picks?
It's an old pick, but somebody got me thinking about it. Yeah, I think I mentioned back when I read it, John Ronson's So You've Been Publicly Shamed. Specifically, John Rael asked me, hey, have you seen this Tim Minchin video called 15 Minutes? And it's about the 15 minutes of shame that is increasingly horrifically ubiquitous today. And it's an adorable music video with a sentiment that I enjoyed quite a bit. So if you want to experience a 4-minute music video by Tim Minchin, just type in Tim Minchin 15 minutes. If you want to do a deep dive, read that whole book by John Ronson, So You've Been Publicly Shamed. It's great.
I remember when we went to go see Auntie Donna in L.A., we were walking out, and the guy in front of me, I was like, man, that dude has some, like, Tim Minchin hair. Like, I don't know anybody else that has that hair other than Tim Minchin. And it was Tim Minchin. So it turns out I'm right. There's nobody.
Here's the rule. Andrew's rule about LA. If you're thinking, man, that person looks a lot like it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. I didn't know he was even in LA. I thought he was.
Everybody's in LA. You're in LA right now. You didn't know that, but you are.
Yeah.
I could walk out the door from here and like just get done podcast. And if I saw a guy, I'm like, hey, Justin. I just assume, you know. Anybody else picks?
Well, let me just say, yeah, the dangerous world of comedy with Larry Charles. Just go check it out. It is. I'm excited to watch the rest of it, but hey, warning: graphic violence. Not only depicted, but also shown. A lot of corpses, a lot of violence, a lot of death, and a lot of screwed up stuff discussed obviously in the comedy and in everything around it. But go check it out.
I have a pick. I have a half pick. I have a half pick because I'm watching it and I don't love it, but I like it.
I love the way your voice will go up on these things.
There's I was trying out Fubo TV because I wanted to watch the AAF, and
just enough like that. That's an amazing thing. That you've gone from ambivalent about sports to being so thirsty for football content. You are now watching the Spring League, and you bought something or engaged in something specifically to watch it. Is amazing.
Yeah, it's a 7-day trial. Fubo TV has a good app, by the way. But the game had finished, and I was just scrolling through channels, and I had seen this on Adult Swim, and it got me to watch, I guess, the original series of it. It's an anime called Sword Art Online. I think it's rather popular. It's also a really weird.
A lot of love-hate for Sword Art Online.
Yeah,
a lot of people have strong opinions about how it ends up.
Yeah, because the first half of the first part of these the episodes are really are interesting because it's like there's just skipping through a lot of time and showing a lot of progression in almost this like anthology style. But then like I'm maybe like 10 episodes in, and it feels like they have like really hit the brakes on a lot of this stuff and are kind of.
I mean, dude, I know that Jason had watched the first few episodes, and when Crunchyroll was the sponsor on Modern Rogue, he was like, "This is really interesting." Some dudes had very strong opinions about whether we were good or bad people because he said he liked Sword Art Online.
Yeah, so it's I can I don't know. It's this feeling. It's fine. I feel like it's fine. And I mostly watched it because I had seen this one that they were showing on TV, which I guess was a later series, and I liked the thing that I was watching there, and so I figured, well, I might as well start at the beginning. So I may push through this first season if the other series are good, but there's like 6 of them. So Sword Art Online. This was on Netflix. Netflix has like 2 or 3 different series of it. So
cool,
groovy. All right.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah, Andrew, you go.
Right.
Yeah.
Go. My pick is go to OpenAI. That's openai.com. Click on blog and read the post they did. And this is what we talked about in Weird Things for the new model they have, the GP2 model. Better language models and their implications. And it's an overview of what it is. Some of it will be technical to some people, but don't you know, a lot of this, I got into it. I didn't know what a lot of it meant. And then I started reading through it more, and I started understanding this is the technology that's going to shape our lives. And either we're going to understand what's going on and be part of it, or it's going to happen to us. Like we talked about Google's algorithms almost at the onset of the show when we started doing weird things about, hey, here's the thing this thing is doing, and this is the thing that people don't pay attention to. 10 years later, we see headlines like, hey, here's the thing Google's doing, and, you know, we didn't realize. And it's like, if you were paying attention and you didn't, if you said, you know what, if you're a reasonably smart person, you can probably get the gist of it. Pay attention. I'm just saying, pay attention, because it's going to affect all of us. And we're going to have politicians, and we're having politicians who want to make policy, and they're dumber than you are. So it's a fact.
Almost as a rule.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyhow, it's worth, you'll see a lot of phrases and stuff like, I don't know quite what this means. Maybe some of you know all of it, you know, but some of you don't feel dumb or intimidated by it. Take a look through there and start to understand and get an idea of what's going on.
Yeah. And if you listen to our talk about it on Weird Things, and you're program minded, you're coding minded, they do provide a source code for a more rudimentary version of their software. So it seems like you could plug this in and play with it today, a version of this.
Yep. A reduced set. So I'm curious to try that to see what it gives up. So cool. It's been after.
It's been after. That's a thing.
We're at 88 people have tried your link now, Brian.
Holy crap.
Man,
Right on.
look at that engagement flex.
No. We haven't sold a single ticket. These skin
Yeah,
flints.
that's the one that matters.
89 skin flints.
I was going to buy a ticket, then Justin called me a skinflint.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You bunch of skin flints.
Alrighty. Well, hey, that's going to do it for us on the stream, on the channel today. Cord Killers is off this week, so that'll be that for us. You doing jury today?
Yep, I'll be live at 3 p.m.
Nice. Andrew, you got any Twitter live streams coming up? Facebook, Instagram?
Maybe some rando ones or something. We'll see. I'm actually going to do a show called Cord Menders. You know, it's about how to get back with HBO and Comcast and all that.
Now, hey,
so,
we had a non-compete when we asked you on last week, so.
they paid me. Yeah, so the great thing about buying a bundled cable plan with your telephone, everything else is you don't have to worry about it. And our helpful people will make sure you get the best value for your dollar.
Brought to
us.
you by Spectrum.
Cable Town.
Yeah.
Cable Town.
Alrighty, well.
Mayor.
Alright, well.
For me, Cable Town with your dollars.
Spend your cable credits at the cable company store.
Use your
Cable
credits
Town
on.
loves you.
Use your credits on a Cameo with Gritty.
I love that we just did our first live by fire test of Podcast Link where I'm hesitantly like, hey, let's test. I'm just doing this thing. And Brian's like, all right, everybody.
I also love that he didn't tell you about it until he said, hey, I've already tweeted about your project and it seems like it's going well.
Yeah, I like all this. Worked for me. Too bad I'm in Melbourne. Worked for me. Too bad. I hate your faces. No.
That's great.
Oh.
Awesome. Alrighty, well.
Movie.
Thank you, everybody. We will see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.